Well, yes, you may know him as the haunting, howling voice of seminal rock band Led Zeppelin. Songs like Stairway to Heaven and Whole Lotta Love made the band into rock and roll legends, with Robert Plant as the defining voice for rock singers who followed him. But Robert Plant is a musician who constantly draws attention away from his legendary status as god of rock by keeping on the move creatively, seeking out and playing dynamic music that references past and present. He collected 5 Grammys last year in 2009 for Raising Sand, his Appalachia-inspired collaboration with bluegrass country singer Alison Krauss. And now, once again, music critics are abuzz with Grammy talk for Robert Plant's gorgeously inspired collection of rockabilly, country, gospel, and soul called Band of Joy. It's a journey into Robert Plant's own iPod playlist, as well as a return to his musical roots. And it's a great pleasure to have Robert Plant with me live in Studio Q. Hello, sir.
Wow, what an introduction. Well, first of all, up there on the Pantheon, there are no iPods. What did Jim Morrison say? Out here on the perimeter, there are no stars.
Are you saying that you don't use an iPod?
I'm saying exactly that.
Why is that?
Because I have 2 decks and sometimes I DJ for myself.
Oh.
Yeah, crossfading. I've just been on the phone to my kid in England who DJs at Ministry of Sound sometimes in London. And I said, I need some decks because I'm going to do the DJing for a Rocky Erickson gig in London in December. And the whole idea of, he said, but nobody uses vinyl anymore, Daddy. But
well, I was going to say, the answer. It's not actually antiquated that you're not using an iPod. You're so progressive that you're actually using decks.
I've gone so far ahead.
Yeah, forget the kids and the iPod stuff. I'm ahead of the curve. You're DJing. I mean, are you one of those people who is a vinyl-phile? You is that what you call it? Somebody who obsesses over vinyl and that warm sound?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, this you were just discussing these new songs. And they're recorded onto 16-track tape. I mean, that's why the bottom end of this sounds so sexy.
Yeah, as that we're playing, we were just talking about the sound, the big sound.
It's because it's you got to get that bandwidth on the bottom of the sound of the thing, and that that'll rattle a few doors if you turn it up. I mean, it's a different kind of disco.
I want to get to this album, but first, I mean, technically, you're I better read this right, commander of the British Empire. Almost knighthood. I call you sir. I called you sir. But I mean, given your status in the UK music scene and that kind of recognition, which comes as no surprise, it's fascinating to me that the music you've become known for, and particularly on this record, is actually more Americana than it would be British. How is a quintessential British rocker like yourself making music that originates in America?
Well, maybe it didn't originate in America. Maybe some of it's Hispanic, maybe some of it's British, Irish, Scottish, and I think that's basically one of the most integral parts of my attraction to going to Tennessee. When I was a kid, I was like so many people of my generation. We were really moved by the deep soul of Black American music from Mississippi, from moving, with development and industry up into Chicago and Detroit, down to New Orleans, where nothing really, it was another world. It wasn't even America. But British kids of my age really were so transfixed by the change and by the dynamic of a black culture that we really, really were, these guys became instant heroes. They may have been unsavory, they may have been unlucky, they may have been hellhounds, they could have been anything, but basically there was a allure to the music of the Black American which kept us going, the Yardbirds, the Stones, Led Zeppelin. But what happened to me later was I found that there was more stuff underneath the covers going on, and it was still coming from Ireland and places in Tennessee and in the mountains where people just hadn't moved on. Families lived there for 5 generations without shifting from one township, so the music followed down through the families, and we got really old songs there. Songs that my great-grandfather, who was a band leader in the Black Country, played fiddle and piano, probably was singing himself.
Which would be called what, folk now?
Oh, sadly.
Not that it matters.
Yeah,
but
I suppose just the music of the land, yeah. But I don't know whether you could find that now in battered societies full of money-grabbing, jet setters. There's no room for anything that comes from anywhere, really.
But let me take the first half of that and then come to the second half in terms of the music of the deep south of America, which and the attraction for you as a young British boy. Robert Johnson, Howlin' Wolf, Blind Willie Johnson, Willie Dixon. You talk about, I just wrote what you said, changes of black culture. But how was that manifesting itself in the music? What was it that you heard that so inspired you?
Well, as a kid, I heard the Blue Note, and I'd never heard anything like it before. Because, traditional Western European music doesn't contain... There was parts of the scales of the music which were coming from West Africa, which I now know about because I spent time there quite a lot. But I couldn't explain. I had no forewarning at all because, the squeaky clean, white, clean and neat side of British popular music when I was growing up in the early 50s was abominable. It was deplorable. It was enough to make you sort of run away and become a soccer player, if you were lucky. So this music was haunting, and it came through in so many ways. It came through in the voice of Presley. It came through a little bit with Little Richard, although it was, some of the flip sides of his stuff. It came through, but of course it came through from the old masters.
I'm going to come back to this later in the interview, but is it ironic to you that when I think of you and your role, both as a vocalist, as a writer, and then with Led Zeppelin, people often talk about you as a pioneer. Is it ironic to you that you're considered a pioneer when you're so steeped in other music that you grew up on?
I don't think about, labels and stuff don't interest me. All I'm concerned about is that I don't get my powder wet. If I'm a pioneer, I'm keeping my powder dry because I'm always looking. And that's the great thing about this current period of my career and my life and my inspiration as a guy that walks and talks is that I'm knee deep in new old.
Well, I'm going to get to that. Let's talk about that. This record, which, by the way, both a beautiful and adventurous record, Robert. I mean, you've done it again, sir. Knight. What do I call it? Commander.
What have I got to lose? I can only gain by being true to my school. And what joy to have found my way through round the back of Alison Krauss's skirts to Buddy, and
Buddy Miller, who you made this record with.
Yeah.
But how did you go about, this is a pretty eclectic stuff. You cover everything from American standards to 60s soul, slowcore, rockabilly. You wrote one new one with Buddy Miller. How do you go about selecting what's going on this record?
You don't. You just keep playing. You start at 11 in the morning and finish before the bars shut. And you just keep churning stuff out and saying, what about this? Oh, and have you heard this? And I came well equipped to this game in the last, perhaps maybe since 1990.
Yes.
I've been really focusing on what I really want to do, bringing in North African people, stuff, music, inspiration, influence. Even some of the mixes and the alternative 12-inch mixes and stuff that I've done, say with Strange Sensation, it's just, I want to get this stuff as trippy and as far out as I possibly can because that's why I started in the beginning.
But this is not the first time that you've remade folk and blues songs, too. Before Alison Krauss, you earned praise and a couple of Grammy nominations for Dreamland in 2002. Are you always on the hunt for obscure, say, American songs to cover, or do they just fall out of whatever you're listening to at the time?
Well, looking at your walls here,
yes,
I would say...
You're going to make fun of the Bee Gees again?
No, I would say that apart from... Jimi Hendrix. I think I'd have to keep clear a lot of mainstream popular music. Otherwise, I would have been running a nice boutique now somewhere in northern England. Because you could give up really quickly if you.
Bob Marley,
yes,
Sabbath is up there.
Absolutely spectacular.
Who? Black Sabbath? No.
Have a word with. Yeah, never mind.
Right, okay. Note to self. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They'll go a long way. And they'll influence a lot of people in Seattle.
Okay. Not a fan?
Sorry.
Not a fan.
Lovely. Great.
Great.
Yeah. And, What would you do without Bobby Goldsboro as well?
Your point was it's not a lot of popular music that influences what you've drawn from. And what I was asking was, how actively are you seeking? How actively are you rifling through old albums in some vinyl store?
No, it's serendipity, really. I mean, my friend at the BBC, Bob Harris, is a really renowned.
He's been on the show.
Yeah, has he? Yeah, he's a fantastic guy, and it all comes into his lap. I've been and done this very thing with him at his place in Oxfordshire, and he's got stuff piled up. When the Low Anthem thing came out, he got it. When Arcade Fire first appeared, he got it.
He was there.
He doesn't have to do anything. It's just there. I think it's abysmal. And John Peel was the same. He had so much stuff. He could develop his taste based on everybody else's ambition, which was great. I don't have that facility, but I have a lot of friends that say, hey, what about, this or that.
The title of this album, Band of Joy, also the name of the group, of course, you formed with drummer John Bonham in 1967. In those pre-Led Zeppelin days, you were combining blues music with psychedelic trends of the time. Is there a relationship between the impetus for this record and what you were trying to do back then?
Yeah, me. And my gung-ho, carefree, take it however you like, or wherever you like, really. I think I've done so many things, but in that Band of Joy originally with Bonzo and Kevin and all those guys, we just kept battling on. It was like one of those Neil Young videos, when the wind machine's really going at it and Neil's striding through all sorts of different dimensions before he gets to the camera. That was what those early days were like, but absolutely...
What was the wind?
The wind was the absolute disinterest of the entire world. We were just doing this thing and believing in it avidly and lavishly and hungrily, in every respect. And I got halfway through this thing, and when Patty Griffin joined up and started putting those vocals on the low tracks, I went, okay.
This record, Band of Joy, yeah.
Yeah. I thought, this is the Band of Joy again. We've got this kind of thing going on where, can this ever be alongside mainstream music? Well, yeah, I guess it can, but most importantly, it gives me, it continues my desire to knock myself out at any expense, really.
But given that you went on to form a band with some of the same guys that would not just become iconic, but do pretty good business too, how ambitious were you in a careerist sense back in Band of Joy? I mean, was it really this free abandon, let's play the music that inspires us? Or, did you have an ambition to also become a big rock band?
Well, there weren't really... Were the big rock bands? I suppose there were, but
the Stones.
Yeah, but you didn't see it like that because they were so far removed from where we were at.
Right.
We were we hadn't even got a foot in the door to open it to get out or in. We were just there, and it only.
Not to mention the wind.
Yeah,
blowing
the wind,
the door shut.
Neil's hair, the whole thing. I mean, who was to ever know? There was no perspective. There was nothing at all to do with success. But what there was Bonzo and I thought that we were pretty good. And we used to bore the pants off everybody, telling everybody that we were. When you pointed to those guys over there, he used to tell them that they weren't very good.
Right. Sabbath.
If you insist. Yeah.
just to put it clear, I just want to make sure the audience knows who we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, because you can't film that wall.
Well, no, we move the cameras over there.
Well, Olivia Newton-John's not on there either. But yeah, so, I mean, really, we were really fired up. We were up for it, and... I've kind of always been up for it, really. If you've got a gift, use it, but use it so that you never get tired of the gift. It's pointless being a one-trick pony. I don't know who you got coming in here next, but I'm gone because there's a soccer match on Saturday and Morocco on Monday. So. But what a great horse to ride.
When you know you have a gift, so on a personal level, Now, forget about the ambitions of the band. Did you know how good your voice was? Did you know that you'd be sitting here? Did you have a sense of it? You 40 years later and doing interviews about being an iconic influencer of generations of musicians?
Well, when I was 18, I looked at bloke 60 and felt sorry for him. So I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of that going on right now, really.
I don't think in your case.
But I don't think for a second that I had any long-term vision of anything.
Really?
Absolutely.
Ever?
No, well, yes, obviously I got older and I became a father and I played soccer in the village football team, and I wanted to do good. I wanted to be in the team every week. I wanted to be in the team. But the whole perspective and where the whole game has gone to get to this point at this table today is insane. This has got nothing to do with where it began.
I want to talk about one of the songs on this record that harkens back to some of your earliest musical influences. It's called Central 209. It's the one you co-wrote with Buddy Miller. What can you tell us about that song?
I've never heard such original lyrics in my life. I don't think anybody's ever been so profound before with such huge depth of meaning.
You're being sarcastic, but it's a great song. You don't want to say
yeah, it's great, but I nicked every single line from every single song.
You're a rip-off artist, Robert Plant.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
That's good. You cleared that up.
Yeah.
That song in particular, some people listening to that song might hear parallels to the acoustic sounds that you had while you were in Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin. I hear that. You've been a solo artist for 30 years now. Back in the 1980s, when you struck out on your own and you were determined, I would imagine, to carve out a separate identity for yourself, did you actively avoid recording songs that could be seen as Led Zeppelin music?
Well, no, because on my first album, Pictures at 11, I wrote a track called Slow Dancer with Robbie Blunt, and it was based on an orchestral part from Kulthum in Cairo, and it was as big and as beautiful and as emotive as you could ever wish for anything to ever be. No. But what happened was, for me, is I knew that there was no way of surpassing the great day. And therefore I must give it as much distance as I can, otherwise I'll get towed back into some kind of clone type situation. And what happened was the 80s techno boom arrived, and it's kind of deplorable now if you listen to some of the stuff that happened, including some of my stuff. But then again, it was such an adventure for me to link up with young guys who were writing stuff that was far out or far in. It was as far away from the human league as you could get, but at the same time, it was going places that disturbed a lot of people who were into what I'd been doing before. And I'd been pretty involved in songwriting and so on in the 70s, on all those records.
Sure.
But I really wanted to strike out and see what it was like to work with Cubase, with all sorts of sampling and all that kind of stuff. I really liked the idea of exploring the techniques of the time. I didn't want to become an acoustic artist, or mellow down and do stuff in opening for James Taylor or something like that. There's
Right.
no need. I was only 32 when that part of my life ended.
When you say you wanted to avoid a clone type of situation, what does that mean?
Well, if I'd have got too close to the rock condition,
It would invite comparisons immediately.
Well, and not only that, there was a lot of people. There were a lot of bands around then at that time. The sort of poodle rock type of thing that was dreadful. It was basically just popular music dressed up in high heels,
Right.
And funny haircuts, of which I was sadly I had the haircut
right.
for a while.
You're not shy about talking about other bands. So far we got Sabbath,
No!
Human League.
I just said I know somebody who had a comment to make. That's all I said. Don't let's not get it wrong. I haven't had a drink for at least a couple of hours. I know exactly what happened then. And it was trends, and people look back and go, ah.
But you're 32 years old. I think about this period for you, and it must have been daunting. You've just come out of fronting this band that's risen to, as I say, iconic status. You're launching a solo career. How difficult was that period for you?
I don't know, because I have to take it on the nose as it comes, And it was interesting because I was very naked after all that sort of. I was kind of embalmed and if you like, swimming in a particularly, I suppose, exclusive little pool for a long time. Not that that was a particularly great place to be a lot of the time, but it was still there, and I was still part of it all. But these changes come anyway in a life, whatever you do, you know.
Were you scared?
Yeah, I was scared. I was also vulnerable, more than scared, really, and also I was excited because I could call all the shots and I could make all the mistakes and all the errors, and you know, and go either way, one way or the other, and just do it. And if you, I mean, there's some fantastic stuff because of its absurdity that I was involved in then, and it was great. You know, once the 80s went out the way, and I started recording Fate of Nations in 91, I think it was. By then, I was working with Richard Thompson, with all sorts of different people. Moya from Clanad, Nigel Eaton was playing hurdy-gurdy, Nigel Kennedy was playing violin with me. Had string sections and with Sarod and from South India playing on records. And I was growing up, you know. I was kind of really coming around, and yeah, I was touring and being a bit of a parody, but I was having a laugh, you know. And it was good. I had some great opening acts, fantastic, you know. The Black Crows, I played with them a lot, and up here Alana Miles opened a few times. And it was just a very exciting time. So there was loads and loads of people coming from different angles, all with great advice for me.
Right.
Of which I listened to none.
Pretty much the moment you go solo, from then on, it becomes a game of how many Led Zeppelin songs is he going to play in his set list? You know, and you trying to at times avoid that. I mean, now that you're you've made such a solo career, and you're 30 years in, is it easier to strike that balance? Is it actually fun to play to invite the Zeppelin songs as part of the mix into what you do?
Well, I never even think about it. I know that there's songs of the ages, you know. We talked about music coming from Ireland and Scotland, going to Tennessee. You know, we talked about the Pilgrim Fathers taking songs, jigs and reels across. And I guess for me, I got to incorporate a bit of everything. And I like to watch Patty Griffin's face when I start going into character. And singing one or two of those.
Not to mention her incredible voice, huh?
Yeah. And she goes, yeah, sing that one. Sing that one. And I'm going, no, I don't like that one. It's a parody. Sing that one. Which is really funny. It's very, very jovial.
The Honey Drippers notwithstanding, how much of your solo career really found its identity when you started re-engaging with music that inspired you before Led Zeppelin? The kind of music that we're talking about, Black Country, or from the Black Country in the UK, or the folk or the blues.
Well, I don't know really, because I was always, even with Manic Nirvana and stuff, I was using acoustics, but I was making them very clanky and making records that sounded of the time, but I was also out of time, you know. There was a track called Tie-Dye on the Highway where I was sampling Wavy Gravy from Woodstock, you know, and Stephen Stills, when Crosby stole the stash, played at Woodstock. Stills was saying, tell them who we are. Tell them who we are. So I kept sampling that. But I was having a ball within it all, and I was making my own folk, you know. I was just exaggerating here and there. But as I say, maybe Fate of Nations was the time when I really did start putting my shoulders back and moving into another gear. I
guess another way of asking this is, and maybe artists feel this with every point of their career and every album they put out or book or painting, but do you feel like you found Robert Plant more than you ever have before? You're closer to your musical inspiration than you've ever been.
No, I think, again, if you go from Fate of Nations through, it's all 100% me, 120% probably me, because I do go until I can't stand up sometimes. And I think that the records up to maybe, up until I met Alison, I was writing really well again, properly. I was writing as a man would write rather than as a guy who was 20. You know, if you think about Good Times, Bad Times and Communication Breakdown, I was 20 and I knew nothing except for I knew I loved Dion. You know, I knew that it was all about, like, it was, so the whole, my diction, my vocabulary, my worldliness, everything had changed to be around so long, you know.
Is that another way of saying that you didn't feel like you were 100% you in Led Zeppelin?
No, not at all. I was always 100% me, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. I wouldn't have done it. There weren't many tracks that Zeppelin didn't use. They were all pretty, there was a lot of incendiary material there, but there was never a time when it wasn't fully fledged, I don't think. But I think probably, you know, in the last 10 years, if you like, there's much more of me expressively. I suppose really I don't really, I play the game, but I don't play the game. If I didn't play the game, I wouldn't be here. But I like the game. It's just sometimes it comes a bit thick and fast. You wouldn't be talking to me in 8 months' time, you know, possibly, because...
I'd probably talk to you anytime.
But that's very kind of you, thank you. But however, you know, this is all based around a release of a record.
Sure.
So
you're playing the game.
If I go to Marrakesh and write a book, people won't be that interested.
You're welcome to come on the show and talk about the book you write at Marrakesh.
Yeah, if I get a publisher.
No, even without the publisher. That sounds interesting. Robert, whether it's blues, gospel, soul, Middle Eastern music, Led Zeppelin, there appears to be, let me try this on you, a spiritual cry in the songs you sing. It sounds like there's a sense of yearning. Does that resonate for you?
It's called in Welsh Hiraeth, and there's a word for it in Arabic too, which I can't remember. And it is almost that place, that solitary place that makes performance special. I mean, it's great that in Welsh literature it's known as Hiraeth. It's just the longing, yeah.
And does that just come out of you, or do you have to tap into that?
No, I've got it everywhere. It's all over me, in my pockets, in my bag. I mean, no, I am full of yearning. I guess I just like the idea.
What are you yearning for?
I just like the idea of turning a song into something really beautiful, really, especially in these last two records where they're not my songs, really. To take somebody else's, I mean, for example, Townes Van Zant's Harm Swift Way is a spectacular, an amazing lyrical expose to his life at the end of his life. I mean, stunning, really, and yet nothing to be pleased about. But he wrote it, and each couplet carries another daunting echo of his life, you know. And to actually get into somebody else's place and make that a justifiable gig, to get into somebody else's song, is really quite something.
How conscious are you when you're singing?
Oh, pretty much.
You think about, you are.
Yeah,
It's not some sort of spiritual expectorating.
Well, maybe it is with a few oohs and ahs, but the thing about that song, and also like Richard's song House of Cards, you know, and quite a few of these songs here, the low songs, I mean, Monkey, for example, is it's a story that doesn't have a beginning or middle or an end. It's just you're arriving in some place that these people have created, which is amazing. I can't do that. I know myself too well to be able to write like that, but I can get that in there, and I can just push it on for him a bit. You know?
Are you aware of we talk about your influences, and we've been talking a lot about names from the past that inspired you. Are you aware of the influence that you've had? That the people who cite you, people talk about Jeff Buckley or Freddie Mercury, or you creating a vocal sound in rock music. Are you aware of that? Do you acknowledge that? Do you recognize that?
Well, I know that both, you mentioned two spectacular vocalists there. I mean, both of whom had much better chops than me. I mean, real great singers. I just get into songs and live them out, which is a different thing, you know. And I think that's true. If everything else I said wasn't true, that's really true. I mean, Jeff Buckley's voice. I was playing with Jimmy in the mid-90s when we had working with an Egyptian ensemble, and we played in a festival in Switzerland, and Jeff Buckley was playing, and we went to see him, and it was mind-altering. His voice, spectacular singing, and so much conviction.
Yeah.
You know.
I saw him in a tiny room in Cafe Chenet in New York once.
Yeah.
And he was just bigger than the room for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, when there's an adamance about putting a point over with singers, you know, when you can say, like the woman Kulthum, who I mentioned, who inspired me for that track, Slow Dancer. I mean, she could set the world on fire just by holding a note for a minute while her orchestra just stood on a B flat, and then she would just drop her hand and Egypt would burst. You know, a handkerchief from her hand and the whole place would just go. I mean, there's so much tension and so much beauty in these singers that, I mean, all I do is I just get into great songs.
Alison,
I don't know whether or not. I mean, I knew Freddie quite well, and he was a wonderful guy. You know, and, we used to sit and talk about what we're going to do. Our voices are going. You know,
you never heard his voice go.
No.
Or yours, quite frankly. Alison Krauss has said this about you. I don't know if you've heard this. He's all about the next tune, the next arrangement. He's about tomorrow night's show. And when we get to tomorrow, he'll be about the next one. It's interesting to me because you look back so much musically in this record and in the records you make. But that description of you suggests that you don't look back too much when it comes to yourself. It's always about forward. Would that be right?
I don't know. I mean, Alison says a lot of things. If she's been eating a lot of chocolate, I don't know. But
sorry, they're dismissive. It's a heartfelt thing she was saying about you.
Bless her. She knows I'm joking. And no, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, even though these songs on this album are not today's songs, they are today's music for me and for what's going on and for the gigs that we've done, ripping places to pieces, you know, theatres that smell of, you know, sulfur. Probably the wrong chemical. But so really, it's not old, it's new, it's everything. It's all the same age.
When you look back earlier in this interview, you said something about one of your 80s records. You used the word deplorable. Are you critical of your back catalog? Can you listen to your stuff?
Well, only I am until I get perspective. And then when I get perspective, I admire myself. I mean, like, you know, somebody said Shaken and Stirred was like, avoid it, said Q magazine, or they talked about my career like something's going to happen, and they said, you know, avoid. And yeah, I think that was a major breakthrough for me. I think I'd left rock and roll way behind and formed my own music idiom for about a week, and that's all I needed.
If being an artist, if part and parcel of being an artist is the self-doubt and insecurity at times that comes with the art, with creating art, how self-critical are you these days? I mean, is there a point that one can get to when you are a rock icon, when you're a British commander of the British Empire, where you don't have a self-doubt?
Well, I'm in a new world now, you know, so I'm not expected to be anybody that anybody knew before. It's quite profound, really, and that's the great thing since teaming up with Alison and now with Buddy and Patty and Daryl and Byron, you know, and Marco and all this kind of rumbling shake that we've created, is that nobody wants me to be comparing myself to a 20-year-old guy. This is a new land. These are frontiers for me. So I don't care about any of those equations really.
But on a day-to-day level, if you have a lousy gig, do you get
Oh yeah.
angry at yourself?
No, I can't get angry because I should have just had a longer nap before the gig, I suppose, really, or perhaps some Geritol, I don't know. But whatever it is, I can't really. I live for the second. I don't want to hear it afterwards. I can't stand that crap.
Robert Plant, you've made the case throughout this interview of being an explorer, I think, a wanderer, somebody who wants to continue to find adventure musically, creatively. Do you think that you'll ever stop being an explorer?
Well, I think that you're being very, you're painting a very colourful picture of a guy who's just very lucky. I'm getting new friends, and they're making the sort of panorama and the scenery of my life and my music much more colourful than I could have ever hoped for.
It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
I thank you very much for this.
It's been great. I'm, despite the pictures. Wham!
Well,
Oh, how topical could you get? Yeah.
There's a cross section.
A suit
material.
with arrows on it.
Some of it is ironic.
Yeah.
Some of it not.
I get the picture. Slowly.
That's legendary singer and songwriter Robert Plant. His new album is called Band of Joy. It's out on Universal, and Robert Plant has been with me here in Studio Q. You grew up on?
I don't think about, I mean, labels and stuff don't interest me. All I'm concerned about is that I don't get my powder wet. If I'm a pioneer, I'm keeping my powder dry because I'm always looking. And that's the great thing about this current period of my career and my life and my inspiration as a guy that walks and talks is that I'm knee deep in new old.
Well, I'm going to get to that. Let's talk about that. This record, which, by the way, both a beautiful and adventurous record, Robert. I mean, you've done it again, sir. Knight, what do I call it? Commander.
What
you've
have
done
I got,
it again.
Yeah, well, what have I got to lose? I mean, I can only gain by being true to my school. And what joy to have found my way through round the back of Alison Krauss's skirts to Buddy, and
Buddy Miller, who you made this record with.
Yeah.
But how did you go about, I mean, this is a pretty eclectic stuff. You cover everything from American standards to 60s soul, slowcore, rockabilly. You wrote one new one with Buddy Miller. How do you go about selecting what's going to go on this record?
You don't. You just keep playing. You start at 11 in the morning and finish before the bars shut. And you just keep churning stuff out and saying, what about this? Oh, and have you heard this? And I mean, I came well equipped to this game in the last, perhaps maybe since 1990.
Yes.
I've been really focusing on what I really want to do, bringing in North African people, stuff, music, inspiration, influence. Even some of the mixes and the alternative 12-inch mixes and stuff that I've done, say with Strange Sensation, it's just, I want to get this stuff as trippy and as far out as I possibly can because that's why I started in the beginning.
But this is not the first time that you've remade folk and blues songs, too. Before Alison Krauss, you earned praise and a couple of Grammy nominations for Dreamland in 2002. Are you always on the hunt for obscure, say, American songs to cover, or do they just fall out of whatever you're listening to at the time? Well, yes, you may know him as the haunting, howling voice of seminal rock band Led Zeppelin. Songs like Stairway to Heaven and Whole Lotta Love made the band into rock and roll legends, with Robert Plant as the defining voice for rock singers who followed him. But Robert Plant is a musician who constantly draws attention away from his legendary status as god of rock by keeping on the move creatively, seeking out and playing dynamic music that references past and present. He collected 5 Grammys last year in 2009 for Raising Sand, his Appalachia-inspired collaboration with bluegrass country singer Alison Krauss. And now, once again, music critics are abuzz with Grammy talk for Robert Plant's gorgeously inspired collection of rockabilly, country, gospel, and soul called Band of Joy. It's a journey into Robert Plant's own iPod playlist, as well as a return to his musical roots. And it's a great pleasure to have Robert Plant with me live in Studio Q. Hello, sir.
Wow, what an introduction. Well, first of all, up there on the Pantheon, there are no iPods. And what did Jim Morrison say? Out here on the perimeter, there are no stars.
Are you saying that you don't use an iPod?
I'm saying exactly that.
Why is that?
Because I have 2 decks and I can't. Sometimes I DJ for myself.
Oh.
Yeah, crossfading. I've just been on the phone to my kid in England who DJs at Ministry of Sound sometimes in London, and I said I need some decks because I'm going to do the DJing for a Rocky Erickson gig in London in December, and the whole idea of he said, but nobody uses vinyl anymore, Daddy. But
well, I was going to say the answer. It's not actually antiquated that you're not using an iPod. You're so progressive that you're actually using decks.
I've gone so far ahead.
Yeah, forget the kids and the iPod stuff. I'm ahead of the curve. You're DJing. I mean, are you one of those people who is a vinyl-phile? You is that what you call it? Somebody who obsesses over vinyl and that warm sound?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, this you were just discussing these new songs. And they're recorded onto 16-track tape. I mean, that's why the bottom end of this sounds so sexy.
Yeah, as that we're playing, we were just talking about the sound, the big sound.
It's because it's you got to get that bandwidth on the bottom of the sound of the thing, and that that'll rattle a few doors if you turn it up. I mean, it's a different kind of disco.
I want to get to this album, but first, I mean, technically, you're I better read this right, commander of the British Empire. Almost knighthood. I call you sir. I called you sir. But I mean, given your status in the UK music scene and that kind of recognition, which comes as no surprise, it's fascinating to me that the music you've become known for, and particularly on this record, is actually more Americana than it would be British. How is a quintessential British rocker like yourself making music that originates in America?
Well, maybe it didn't originate in America. Maybe some of it's Hispanic. Maybe some of it's British, Irish. Scottish, and I think that's basically one of the most integral parts of my attraction to going to Tennessee. When I was a kid, I was like so many people of my generation. We were really moved by the deep soul of Black American music from Mississippi, from moving, with development and industry up into Chicago and Detroit, down to New Orleans, where nothing really, it was another world. It wasn't even America. But British kids of my age really were so transfixed by the change and by the dynamic of a black culture that we really, really were, these guys became instant heroes. They may have been unsavory, they may have been unlucky, they may have been hellhounds, they could have been anything, but basically there was a allure to the music of the Black American which kept us going, the Yardbirds, the Stones, Led Zeppelin. But what happened to me later was I found that there was more stuff underneath the covers going on, and it was still coming from Ireland and places in Tennessee and in the mountains where people just hadn't moved on. Families lived there for 5 generations without shifting from one township, so the music followed down through the families, and we got really old songs there. Songs that my great-grandfather, who was a band leader in the Black Country, played fiddle and piano, probably was singing himself.
Which would be called what, folk now?
Oh, sadly.
Not that it matters.
Yeah,
but
I suppose just the music of the land, yeah. But
So,
I don't know whether you could find that now in battered societies full of money-grabbing, jet setters. There's no room for anything that comes from anywhere, really.
But let me take the first half of that and then come to the second half in terms of the music of the deep south of America, which and the attraction for you as a young British boy. Robert Johnson, Howlin' Wolf, Blind Willie Johnson, Willie Dixon. You talk about, I just wrote what you said, changes of black culture. But how was that manifesting itself in the music? What was it that you heard that so inspired you?
Well, as a kid, I heard the Blue Note, and I'd never heard anything like it before. Because, traditional Western European music doesn't contain... There was parts of the scales of the music which were coming from West Africa, which I now know about because I spent time there quite a lot. But I couldn't explain. I had no forewarning at all because, the squeaky clean, white, clean and neat side of British popular music when I was growing up in the early 50s was abominable. It was deplorable. It was enough to make you sort of run away and become a soccer player, you know, if you were lucky. So this music was haunting, and it came through in so many ways. It came through in the voice of Presley. It came through a little bit with Little Richard, although it was, you know, some of the flip sides of his stuff. It came through, but of course it came through from the old masters.
I'm going to come back to this later in the interview, but is it ironic to you that when I think of you and your role, both as a vocalist, as a writer, and then with Led Zeppelin, people often talk about you as a pioneer. Is it ironic to you that you're considered a pioneer when you're so steeped in other music that...
Well, you know, looking at your walls here,
Yes.
I would say...
You're going to make fun of the Bee Gees again?
No, I would say that apart from, you know, Jimi Hendrix, I think I'd have to keep clear a lot of mainstream popular music. Otherwise, I would have been running a nice boutique now somewhere in northern England, you know, because you could give up really quickly if you...
Bob Marley? The
yes,
Sabbath is up there?
Absolutely spectacular.
Who? Black Sabbath? No?
Have a word with... Yeah, never mind.
Okay. Note to self. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They'll go a long way. And they'll influence a lot of people in Seattle.
Okay. Not a fan?
Sorry.
Not a fan.
Lovely. Great.
Great.
Yeah. And, you know, what would you do without Bobby Goldsboro as well?
Your point was it's not a lot of popular music that influences what you've drawn from. And what I was asking was, how actively are you seeking? How actively are you rifling through old albums in some vinyl store?
No, it's serendipity, really. I mean, my friend at the BBC, Bob Harris, is a really renowned...
He's been on the show.
Yeah, has he? Yeah, he's a fantastic guy, and it all comes into his lap. I've been and done this very thing with him at his place in Oxfordshire, and he's got stuff piled up, you know. When the Low Anthem thing came out, he got it, you know. When Arcade Fire first appeared, he got it.
He was there.
He doesn't have to do anything. It's just there. I think it's abysmal. And John Peel was the same, you know. He had so much stuff. He could develop his taste based on everybody else's ambition, which was great. You know, I don't have that facility, but I have a lot of friends that say, hey, what about, you know, this or that.
The title of this album, Band of Joy, also the name of the group, of course, you formed with drummer John Bonham in 1967. In those pre-Led Zeppelin days, you were combining blues music with psychedelic trends of the time. Is there a relationship between the impetus for this record and what you were trying to do back then?
Yeah, me and my gung-ho carefree